A man sits alone in a field outside Jerusalem. It is around 1000 BC. He is a shepherd, a soldier, a poet, and right now, he is in the worst pain of his life. His enemies have circled him. His bones feel pulled apart. His mouth is dry as broken pottery. He can barely breathe. He begins to write. He writes in Hebrew. He writes about thirst, about mocking voices, about hands and feet that are pierced. He writes about soldiers gambling at his feet over a piece of clothing. He writes a prayer that ends with these words: they will proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, for he has done it. The man's name is David. The year is roughly 1000 BC, and he has just described, with precise and terrible accuracy, a Roman execution method that will not be invented for another 700 years. At nearly the same moment in history, or close enough, a man named Moses is writing laws about sacrifice, specific laws, strange ones. One of them says this: when you kill the Passover lamb, you must not break a single bone. And 300 years after David, a prophet named Isaiah writes about a servant who is crushed, pierced, and silent before his accusers. A man despised and rejected. A man who bears the iniquities of others. A man who, after all of it, sees light and is satisfied. David, Moses, Isaiah, three different men, three different centuries, three different genres: poetry, law, prophecy. They have never met. They live in different eras with different vocabularies, writing for different audiences. And they describe the same morning, the morning of April 3rd, AD 33. Stay with me. Before we get to the prophecies, you need to understand what crucifixion was, because we have domesticated it. We wear it on gold chains around our necks. We hang it on church walls. We have made it beautiful. It was not beautiful. Cicero, the Roman orator and statesman, writing in the 1st century BC, called crucifixion the most cruel and disgusting penalty. He wrote that even the word cross should be far removed, not only from the person of a Roman citizen, but from his thoughts, his eyes, his ears. Josephus, the Jewish historian who witnessed Roman crucifixion firsthand in the 1st century AD, called it the most wretched of deaths. Roman citizens were exempt from it. It was reserved for slaves, insurrectionists, the worst criminals, people whose deaths were meant to be public, slow, and maximally shameful. The condemned man was stripped. His wrists or hands were nailed or tied to a crossbeam. His feet were nailed to the upright post. He hung there, often for days, dying by asphyxiation, his body weight pulling down on his chest until he could no longer push himself up to breathe. Every breath was a choice to move against agony. The Romans did not invent crucifixion. The Persians and Phoenicians had versions of it before them, but they perfected it as a spectacle of humiliation. You were meant to die slowly, in public, naked, unable to control your body, while people walked past and watched. Now, go back to David's poem. Psalm 22 begins with 7 Hebrew words that every Jewish scholar of Jesus' time would have known by heart. My God, why have you forsaken me? Those are the words Jesus shouts from the cross in Matthew chapter 27. Not a spontaneous cry, not a new prayer, a quotation of a poem written 1,000 years earlier, a poem that Jesus, in the last hours of his life, chose to recite from memory. Here is what most people miss about Psalm 22. It is not just a prediction. It is a first-person account Written as if the writer is living through the event, David does not say a man will suffer these things. He says, I am suffering these things. And then the descriptions begin. I am a worm and not a man scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. Matthew 27, verse 39. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads. Back to Psalm 22. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Crucifixion caused severe dehydration. The position of the body caused extreme stress on every joint, pulling the shoulders and elbows and wrists apart under the weight of the body. Ancient Roman medical sources describe the position as causing a sensation exactly like the body being poured out every joint in agony, nothing staying in place. The pericardium, the sac around the heart, can fill with fluid under extreme physical trauma, which may account for what the Gospel of John records when a soldier pierced Jesus' side. Blood and water came out. A heart that had, in some literal physiological sense, turned to wax. And then this. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. The Hebrew word here has been debated for centuries. Some manuscripts read ka'aru, they pierce. Others read ka'ari, like a lion. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures, completed roughly 250 years before Jesus was born, translates it as they pierced. Whatever the precise Hebrew, the Greek-speaking world in the first century read Psalm 22 as a prophecy about piercing. Crucifixion required it. They divide my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing. This is perhaps the most specific detail in the psalm. Not that his clothing is taken, that happens in every execution, but that it is divided among multiple people, and that for one item specifically, they cast lots. John 19, verses 23 and 24. When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, dividing them into 4 shares, one for each of them, with the undergarment remaining. This garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. They said to one another, let us not tear it. Let us decide by lot who will get it. And this happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled that said, they divided my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. John is explicit. He recognizes the connection in real time. He names the psalm. David wrote it 1,000 years earlier. And this is where it gets remarkable, because David is not the only one, not even close. Move forward roughly 400 years. A prophet named Zechariah is writing in Jerusalem, sometime after the return from Babylonian exile. He is writing strange, symbolic visions, apocalyptic imagery of horses and lampstands and flying scrolls. But in chapter 11, he writes something oddly specific. He plays the role of a shepherd who was rejected by the flock he was supposed to tend. His employers dismiss him. And then, this I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay. But if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver, the precise sum that Judas Iscariot is paid to hand Jesus over to the chief priests. Matthew 26, verse 15. But Zechariah does not stop there. He is told to throw this money to the potter. And in Matthew 27, when Judas returns the 30 pieces of silver in remorse and the chief priests cannot put it into the temple treasury because it is blood money. They use it to buy the potter's field, a piece of land belonging to a potter, as a burial place for foreigners. 30 pieces, a potter, both details, both in Zechariah, both in Matthew. Now move to Zechariah chapter 12. The prophet writes about a day when the inhabitants of Jerusalem will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child. John 19, verse 37, recording the moment the soldier drives a spear into Jesus' side after death to confirm he is dead. These things happen so that the scripture would be fulfilled, and it quotes Zechariah 12 directly. They will look on the one they have pierced. Zechariah wrote that around 520 BC. Pay attention to this. Go further back, all the way back to Moses in the wilderness. Around 1440 BC, God gives Israel very specific instructions about the Passover sacrifice. A lamb, 1 year old, without defect, slaughtered at twilight, its blood on the doorposts, its flesh eaten that night, and this do not break any of the bones. Exodus 12, verse 46. Do not break any of the bones. Numbers 9, verse 12. They must not leave any of it till morning or break any of its bones. 1,500 years of Passover. 1,500 years of Jewish families killing lambs and carefully, deliberately, not breaking a single bone because Moses said so, because God said so, because it was the law. John 19, verses 31 through 36. Because the Jewish leaders did not want the bodies left on the crosses during the Sabbath, since that Sabbath was a high day, they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. The soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and then those of the other. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. John then quotes Exodus directly. These things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled, not one of his bones will be broken. Moses wrote that law while standing in the wilderness, watching a nation of slaves learn to worship. He could not have known what it pointed to. He wrote it because God said to write it. And 15 centuries later, a group of Roman soldiers, pagans who had never read Exodus in their lives, fulfilled it, not intentionally, not consciously, simply because Jesus was already dead and there was no point in breaking the bones of a dead man. The soldiers were not trying to fulfill prophecy. They were just doing their job. That is the part that should stop you cold. Now we come to the climax. Isaiah 53, written approximately 700 years before Jesus was born, quoted more often in the New Testament than almost any other passage of the Hebrew Scriptures. And for 2,000 years, Jewish and Christian scholars have argued about who Isaiah is talking about. Read it without any assumption. Read it as if you have never heard of Jesus. He grew up before him like a tender shoot and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Mark 15, verse 4. So again, Pilate asked him, aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of. But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Back to Isaiah. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. The Hebrew word translated pierced in Isaiah 53, verse 5, is chalal, which carries the meaning of being fatally wounded, run through. The word translated crushed is daka, to be broken into pieces, pulverized. These are not gentle metaphors. They are the language of violent death. And then this detail, which most readers pass over, he was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. Jesus is crucified between two criminals, the wicked, but Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy member of the Sanhedrin, asked Pilate for the body and places it in his own new tomb with the rich in his death. Isaiah wrote both halves of that sentence. Both halves were fulfilled in the same weekend. Here is the part nobody tells you about Isaiah 53. It was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947. The scroll dates to approximately 100 BC, over a century before Jesus was born. The text is nearly identical to what we have in our Bibles today. This matters because it closes a loophole that skeptics sometimes use, that perhaps the text was written after the fact and backdated. The Dead Sea Scroll of Isaiah was copied before the events it describes. It was sitting in a cave in the Judean desert, waiting. Now watch what happens next, because this is where everything converges. On the morning of the Passover feast in AD 33, a man is nailed to a cross outside Jerusalem. He is stripped. His clothes are divided. Soldiers gamble for his seamless robe, just as Psalm 22 said. He cries out the opening words of Psalm 22, not as a coincidence, but as a citation, a declaration that this moment is the moment the psalm was always about. He thirsts. His bones are not broken because the soldiers find him already dead and see no reason to bother. A spear is driven into his side, fulfilling Zechariah 12. He is buried by a rich man, fulfilling Isaiah 53. He had been handed over for 30 pieces of silver, which were used to buy a potter's field, fulfilling Zechariah 11. Every detail, not one or two, every detail. And then 3 days later, something happens that Isaiah may also have seen coming. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. This is not a story about coincidence. The mathematical probability of one person accidentally fulfilling even 8 of the Messianic prophecies has been estimated by scholars who specialize in probability theory at 1 in 10 to the 17th power. That is a 1 followed by 17 zeros. To illustrate, if you filled the state of Texas 2 feet deep with silver dollars and marked one of them with a red X and blindfolded a person and told them to reach down and pick one coin, the odds of picking the marked coin on the first try are approximately 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Jesus fulfilled not 8, he fulfilled over 300. 3 takeaways, and the last one is the one that changes everything. First, the prophecies were not vague. This is what skeptics get wrong. Prophecies like these are often dismissed as generic, as the kind of thing that could apply to anyone. But Psalm 22 is not vague. 30 pieces of silver is not vague. No broken bones is not vague. A potter's field purchased with blood money is not vague. These are specific, falsifiable details. They either match or they do not. They match. Second, the people who fulfilled the prophecies were not trying to. The Roman soldiers who gambled for the robe were not reading Psalm 22. The soldiers who skipped the bone breaking were not reading Exodus 12. Pilate, who washed his hands of the whole affair and handed Jesus over, was not reading Isaiah 53. The prophecies were fulfilled by people who did not know they were fulfilling anything. That is what makes this different from someone deliberately acting out a script. You cannot make a Roman soldier accidentally fulfill a law written by Moses 1,500 years earlier unless something larger than human intention is moving the story forward. Third, and this is the one David saw, and Isaiah saw, and the Dead Sea Scroll preserves in black ink on aged parchment, waiting in a cave for 2,000 years until someone found it. The story does not end on Friday. Psalm 22 ends with these words, "They will proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, for he has done it." Future tense, then past tense in the same breath. A declaration that what looks like defeat is brabbish from a different vantage point, already finished, already complete, already accomplished. Isaiah saw a servant who would see the light of life after suffering. He saw someone who would divide the spoils, the language of a victor after being numbered among the transgressors. David, writing in the agony of his own life, somehow wrote a poem that was not primarily about his own agony. He wrote a poem that was always waiting for one specific morning, one specific man, one specific cry from one specific cross on one specific hill outside one specific city in one specific year. My God, why have you forsaken me? And the answer hidden in the structure of the poem itself, visible to anyone who reads to the end, is he has not forsaken, he has done it. The suffering servant sees the light of life and is satisfied. And a people yet unborn, which is you, reading this 2,000 years later, will hear about it. If this is the first time you've encountered the depth of these prophecies, spend some time in Psalm 22, Isaiah 53, and Zechariah 11 and 12. Read them slowly. Read them in light of the gospel accounts. Let the precision of it land on you, not as an argument to win, as a reality to reckon with. Something was planned before you were born. Something was written before the method of execution existed. And it was